Regressor of the Fallen Family, Chapter 60. Proper rest my foot. People must be wrung out to be productive. What? Why such frightening words all of a sudden? Dwayne, who had been organizing approved documents, asked with a startled expression. Ah, no, just absurd occurrences. As Logan ruminated over his feelings of betrayal, the daily life of a certain dwarf in the workshop became increasingly arduous. Although minor variables arose in the crossbow production, overall, there were no significant issues. In fact, the progress had quickened. Hammer, with dark circles under his eyes that had spread across his eyelids, managed to produce crossbows for all soldiers in just a few weeks. As a result, the soldiers' training began to gain momentum. Most importantly, the achievement of settling residents from 2 territories into the newly completed 10,000 household facilities of MacLine Town, as planned, was the greatest success. Wow, Mom, is this our house? Wow, it's huge. Are we really going to live here? Yes, that seems to be the case. How did they? A woman carrying a baby on her front and back burst into tears at her children's words. A wooden 2-story house, the awkward layout being very close to neighboring houses and barely the size of 20 pyong per floor, was irrelevant. Compared to the leaky, straw-roofed houses they had lived in all their lives, it might as well have been a palace. I was worried about how we'd survive this winter. This is truly a relief. The tears streaming down her face were those of someone pushed to the brink, now relieved by a ray of hope. But Mom... What is it, child? Will Dad be able to find our new house? Yes. If our Anna listens to Mom well, eats and grows well, your father will also return safely. Really? For real? Yes. A conversation between a 4-year-old sister and her mother. The 12-year-old firstborn, now slightly aware of death, frivolously covered his eyes as he looked to the sky. His mother, seeing this, clutched at her aching heart again. Until a few months ago, she had only thought about dying following her deceased husband. We're given food, a place like this to live, and even land to cultivate. Now she had newfound hope. Thank you. Thank you so much. She bowed again and again, grateful to the nobles far away whom she could neither see nor hear. The resentment toward the nobles who had caused needless wars began to fade a little. The relocated residents, mostly those who had been struggling in the 2 previous territories, were all satisfied with the new settlement and cheered enthusiastically. Each voice did not carry far, but together their cheers filled the town, creating an overall bright atmosphere. The very person they were so grateful for could distinctly feel this uplifting mood. Having lots of people around seems to liven things up. It's nice to see, Clayton remarked, and Logan nodded in agreement. But it still needs to grow. I can see more space suitable for houses. MacLine Town was set to become the central hub for the growing territory. From the top of the Mage Tower, Logan looked down at the town with a bright smile. Now that the village construction is complete, the crossbows will be finished by the end of the month, as promised. Good work. What's wrong? Why aren't you leaving? It's just that. Ah, right. I have to give this to you. Thud. Before the hesitating Hammer, Logan placed down a huge ingot of silver-colored metal. What is this all about? What do you mean? It's mithril. Make some weapons for the knights. What's wrong? Isn't working with rare metals a dwarf's romance? Well, romance. Why, isn't it? Ah, yes. Yes, of course, it's romantic. Right? That's the spirit. Then take all the vacation you want. 6 months is enough, right? Vacation? 6 months of vacation? You don't like long vacations. No, that's not it at all. Thank you. Enjoy it. Experience the true essence of romance while processing mithril. I'm looking forward to seeing what splendid weapons you'll produce. Weapons? Yeah. A romantic vacation with mithril. You should be able to make at least 80 pieces in 6 months, right? Ha. Damn. What? No, nothing. The dwarf bowed his head, trembling but ultimately unable to say anything more. With spring approaching, preparations for a leap forward were steadily progressing. The land clearing is going smoothly. If anything, we have a manpower shortage considering the size of the land. Does that matter? Not really. I'm actually looking forward to this year's harvest. Field manager Rugal Hayes's bald head shone in the spring sunlight, reflecting the bright spirit of MacLine. Rumors of our plains and town have even spread to other regions. What? Logan took unexpected interest in the passing comment, to which Rugal explained with a slight confusion. Yesterday, dozens of refugees came to the town. They seemed to be slash-and-burn farmers, having heard about us from the merchant groups that supply us with food. Quicker than I thought. Yes, it seems they're refugees, after all. They probably came out of a just-in-case mentality. In this era, most commoners belong to a country or territory, living and paying taxes based on their earnings. But not all rulers were wise, nor were all territories livable. Where tyrannical overlords reigned or war broke out, residents would flee troubled territories, take to the mountains, and become slash-and-burn farmers. Hitting a limit or discovered by other rulers, they would wander aimlessly as roaming refugees. Just hearing rumors of vast new farmland and flocking to it indicated they must have been in dire straits. And if such numbers continued to increase... Why are you laughing so ominously, sir? Dwayne, who stood beside Logan, shivered with an unknown anxiety and asked, It's nothing. It doesn't seem like nothing. Ignore it. You took in those refugees, right? Yes. With land to spare, accepting refugees was no big deal. Any precautions? They've been briefed on the basic laws of the territory, and they've been told that causing trouble could lead to expulsion. We plan to handle future refugees in the same manner. Good. Well done. I'm still not comforted. Ignoring Dwayne's murmurs, Logan merely smiled. The news that MacLine was welcoming refugees quickly began to spread among the slash-and-burn farmers and tenant farmers in the kingdom's southwestern region. By county summer months later, nearly 5,000 refugees had settled in the town. This caused neighboring territories to react sensitively to the trend. MacLine? Yes, MacLine Castle has reclaimed the wasteland to the west. That barren land? The report from his subordinate left Marquis Max Ferretta speechless in disbelief. When Teslon foolishly started a war and got devoured by MacLine instead, it was surprising, but he thought it was possible. Patrick MacLine was a formidable force in terms of military prowess, even if he was considered a madman for operating a Knight Order of 50 from the desolate MacLine Castle. At the time, he had considered it a ridiculous move by Teslon to trouble that land. But this was different and unbelievable. They could reclaim that land? I was curious, so I checked. They dug into the mountain to divert water from the Luther River. They dug through a mountain? Madmen, truly. They've reclaimed wasteland with that insanity? Yes. Scouts confirm it's true. Ha. How did they even think of such a task, let alone afford it? Did MacLine have the money? There's a rumor that Teslin had surplus funds or that the Duke's son made some profitable business deal. There are also rumors of a gold mine strike and even divine money falling from the sky. Max Ferretta waved off his subordinate's continuation. Whatever outlandish rumors there may be, let's focus on the tangible facts. Reclamation is confirmed, right? Yes, that's correct. And how does this reclaimed land compare to ours? At least 3 times larger than ours, sir. Even if yields are less because it was once wasteland, it's twice ours. That's right. Overnight, their neighbor had become rich. To sit back and cheer would be unbecoming of true nobility, at least by the standards he knew. We can't just leave it. Do we have any pretext? There's no need to create one. Some serfs escaped to their pioneering village. With the excuse of apprehending them, we could enter their territory. At the Marquis's question, his subordinate Reihart hurriedly responded, "Oh, serfs of ours, my property. That gives us a legitimate reason. What shall we demand in return?" "As you wish. Either that land or the plains adjacent to Teslon. The only problem is..." Reihart's voice trailed off, but the Marquis understood him perfectly. Tsk. Alrune, it could be risky, could it not? Max Ferretta clicked his tongue, although he didn't seem too worried. Fereda's forces were incomparable to the trampled Teslon, numbering over 120 knights and nearly 2,000 regular soldiers. On top of that, they had 2 towns with nearly 40,000 permanent residents. He proudly believed his position to be stronger in every aspect than the plains adjacent to Teslon Castle. But Soto Sylvan, that's the problem, that's right. It would be painful to get stabbed in the back. A pain would be a best-case scenario. Max Ferretta chuckled dryly, remembering his northern rival. Although his peer only held 1 castle, the military force there was not far off from those garrisoned across his 2 castles. Moreover, that castle now bordered the territory of MacLine, which once belonged to Teslon. An eternal thorn in his side. Damn, it's become troublesome. As much as I became an high-class knight, Patrick would be too much to handle, right? Subdued by the Marquise's sudden burst of energy, Reihart paled but nodded. Yes, Patrick MacLine became an high-class knight 20 years ago. To confront him personally would be problematic. If you act alone against MacLine, it will cost blood. Then, if Sylvan strikes from behind. Yes, I share the sentiment. Good insight you have. I'm honored. While others might have construed this as contempt for a ruler, Max Ferretta was not only ambitious, but cautious. Though he believed MacLine could not have recovered so quickly from its injuries, nor become stronger in just 1 year, he wanted to be prepared for any slim chance. Contact Sylvan. They charge as high taxes as us. Surely many have fled from there too, no? Of course, it's obvious what those rabble think. Ferretta and Sylvan were among the territories in the kingdom with the highest tax rates at 70%. If they lured them in, they could swallow MacLine with ease, a coalition of 2 lords. Whether MacLine gets seized entirely or mostly isn't for them to decide anymore. Max Ferretta felt like the fruitful land was already within his grasp. Going there just because the tax rate is lower, how naive. Anyhow, they're sure to raise the taxes substantially after the land is cultivated. Tsk, tsk, short-sighted fools. Isn't that the limit of commoners? Yes, that's why we're the rulers. Well, proceed. Yes, as much as I hate to share the spoils, it can't be helped. A wise choice. Even if MacLine was intact or had grown stronger, an alliance between the 2 lords would be impossible to stop. The sudden prosperity of MacLine was nothing more than a feast laid out before them. At least that's what everyone in the room believed. Regressor of the Fallen Family, Chapter 61. Everything is going well, I see. Yes. Responding to his father's contented smile, Logan answered with a confident expression. Good. How about the soldiers' training? Excluding those drafted for public order, we are continuing with high-intensity training. Additionally, we have identified about 300 soldiers with special talents and are training them intensely without deployment. Are we to understand that there's enough potential among these 300 to become knights? Yes. At least that's what I believe. Dwayne, who had little interest in knight training, simply clapped his hands with a slightly surprised expression, but Heinkel couldn't hide a look of incredulity as he listened to the conversation between father and son. Under the assumption that the soldiers were faithfully following their training, even if one scoured through the military for 10 years like a madman, only about 1 in 100 would awaken to their force and qualify as a knight. Simple calculations implied that among 1,500 soldiers, only about 15 were likely to become knights. Yet Logan spoke nonchalantly of a number 20 times greater, which was absurd to Heinkel. However, his lord nodded in response with a smile, despite the implausibility of such an answer. If you say so, it must be so. No matter how well the family fared, it seemed almost delusional to Heinkel. While he had much to say, he could not bring himself to speak, and instead repeatedly opened and closed his mouth in silence. But the heir apparent did not stop there. We will maintain our current training system and plan to reinforce our soldiers annually. We will also bolster our cavalry and arms every year. My lord, that's... No, why? I am strictly against such a waste of money in these peaceful times. Before Heinkel could object, Dwayne, who had been smiling, suddenly flared up. Mithril. It's a repeat of the Mithril case. Overspending is a habit. It must be stopped. While Heinkel looked on bewilderedly, fortunately, this time even the Lord furrowed his brow. Are you planning for war? Sometimes we must do things we do not wish to, like war. That's what I have learned. But I never taught you that. Patrick forcefully swallowed the words that had risen to his throat. Instead, he pointed out the harsh reality with an icy voice. Our family is in a period of growth. Excessive military expansion could be seen as provocation by neighboring families. That's correct. Wise words, my lord. Heinkel nodded at those words, and Dwayne gave Logan thumbs up as if to show agreement. Yet, whether we provoke them or not, we're bound to be provoked. Logan's bizarre statement bewildered everyone. What? MacLine Town has begun operating in earnest, and the wasteland has been turned into plains. Sylvan and Ferretta, both regions with excessive taxation, have many farmers deserting. Will those greedy wretches sit by idly? Do you think they will attack? Yes. Logan's confident response was immediately met with rebuttal. Whether Sylvan or Ferretta, they do not take us lightly. With our current military strength alone, we can easily handle one of their territories. Your Highness, if you are not informed, those scoundrels are too busy keeping each other in check. They cannot attack without a proper cause. Heinkel and Dwayne had points of their own. Already committed to a plan, Logan could not retreat. Are you saying that if the two territories combine their power, they can easily defeat us? No, that's how it used to be. We have those weapons now. They don't know that, and we have more than enough causes already. What? As Logan mentioned a cause which can be crucial in a war among nobles, everyone's gaze turned towards him. We've taken in quite a lot of refugees. How many of them do you think come from Ferretta or Sylvan? If I were them, it seems like a good excuse. The room's atmosphere chilled swiftly as everyone suddenly became aware of the fact they had overlooked in the development of their territory. If you anticipated such a thing, you should have blocked it. Despite Dwayne shouting, Logan remained cool. Why block it? Especially when we're short on labor anyway. But that could be a pretext for war. Your Highness, don't tell me? You wanted war from the start? As Dwayne's face paled, Patrick asked sternly, We will eventually have to confront our adversaries. If they arrogantly give us an excuse, it would be convenient. Logan, with his eyes cast deeply down, did not deny it. Your Highness? How could this? Ha! The atmosphere in the office grew icy as they looked at Logan as if he were a madman. Heinkel and Dwayne, unable to speak their curses aloud, expressed their frustrations with contorted expressions, while Patrick made his displeasure known more directly. If you had such thoughts, you should have discussed it ahead of time. If I had discussed it, would you not have opposed it? Their scorn was renewed at the brazen reply. Patrick also clutched his throbbing head at the sudden headache as if he had given his authority away too soon. Caught in self-reproach and a deep sigh, there was a sudden commotion. Lord! A servant burst in through the door. Delegates from Sylvan and Ferretta have arrived. They say they have matters to discuss regarding the escaped serfs. The news came with an eerily natural timing, freezing the room even further. Well, it has already begun. Shall we discuss what to do next? A smile spread across Logan's face. Oh, is it Sir Reihart? That's right. And you must be Sir Hamill? It is an honor to meet you. To be entrusted with such an important role at your young age, you must be quite capable. Not at all. I was merely fortunate. It is an honor for me as well to meet someone so influential from the Sylvan territory. Each escorted by 3 knights and 15 servants, both delegations had a similar composition, meeting the minimum standards for protocol. Considering they were essentially envoys sent to threaten, the pitiable size could have been disconcerting, yet there was not a hint of worry on the middle-aged faces of Reihart and Hamill as they exchanged greetings. Please take the time to enjoy our hospitality. Surely you wouldn't rudely turn a blind eye. Ah, ha, ha, ha. If they have any decency, of course not. And we've already sent missives ahead. Their slightly elated demeanor was matched by the relaxed expressions of the knights accompanying them. However, on the following day, when they passed Teslan Castle and slowly entered the old wastes, they involuntarily halted in their tracks. Indeed? All green. It looks like wheat sprouts. This is incredible. Their utterances of astonishment were apt, for every field within sight burst with vibrant greenery. For those who remembered its former state, the transformation was particularly shocking. The once barren, dusty wasteland has changed so. Now, the only yellow in view was a distant rampart-like structure. Hamel, what is that in the distance? Earthworks. It seems, to have built such a massive earthwork unseen. Those who heard murmured in surprise as they looked towards the earthen wall. Is that a castle? No, how could such a large fortification be erected silently like this? The procession continued eastward in silence, only to be further astounded upon nearing the village. Dozens of horsemen. Farmers are clearing the path? What's that big road there? As the farmhands swiftly made way for the approaching riders, a sight of a great cobblestone road connecting east and west came into view. An actual road. The paved road, wide enough to span 5 meters, cut through the green fields and stretched straight towards the earthworks. The extent of what lay before them was beyond their wildest imaginations, and by the time they reached the earthwork, if it could be called that, after half a day's ride, they were at a loss for words. Halt! Who are you, and where have you come from? While the entrance to the earthwork at the end of the road was no more than a 3-meter-tall mud wall, not particularly spacious or grand, it drew the envoy's attention not just because of its modesty. Soldiers, not knights. The lack of emblems on the armor suggests as much. Yes, but for regular soldiers to be equipped like this, MacLine really must be making money. Half-plate mail, greaves, gauntlets, with swords at their waists and spears in hand. The soldiers were outfitted with gear that would be credible on any knight, a staggering revelation reflecting the scale of this massive earthen fortification. Caught off guard, they failed to respond to the soldiers' inquiry, causing a hint of confusion among the ranks. Then a flame-emblazoned knight signaling inside approached. Knight Digram of MacLine, please state your business, visitors. Their eyes followed the knight's gaze to the banners behind Hamel and Reihart. A flame with crossed longswords and a flying falcon on a banner, unique insignia representing a noble's procession, and they hesitated to outright intimidate them. While they would be unable to stop an envoy with 6 knights among a meager force even if they wished. Such a vast construction, yet the earthworks gate is garrisoned by only a knight and 5 soldiers? Considering the scale of the fort, Reihart felt absurd for ever being tense. The military strength must be. Sharing the sentiment, Hamel smirked. Catching his eye, Reihart interrupted before idle talk ensued.
That charade won't do.
Regressor of the Fallen Family, Chapter 62. Amidst the watchful eyes of the MacLine command, including Logan, the envoys boldly proclaimed with an arrogant demeanor, "Our Ferretta demands the return of the eloped vassals, and as compensation for preventing future occurrences, we claim the Teslan plains adjacent to the Ferretta territory and the newly developed wastelands to the southwest. We, Sylvan, demand dominion over Teslan Castle and the transfer of the northwest part of the newly developed wastelands." Logan's predictions were spot on. The envoys had the audacity to utter such ludicrous demands. They wanted an entire castle handed over and half of the newly developed lands. Their claims were no different from an outright threat, essentially challenging MacLine to war. "What do you think?" Logan sent a look that asked whether his predictions weren't correct, to which Patrick sighed softly and nodded with a serious expression. The signal descended to Commander Heinkel below the platform. With a hardened expression, Heinkel stepped forward and shouted loudly, "Are Sylvan and Ferretta proposing warfare against MacLine? Insane! How dare they? Have they lost their minds declaring such nonsense here?" Simultaneously, 30 knights lined up in front of the hall stepped forward in unison to protest. One of them even hastily drew his sword, and the atmosphere in the hall became deadly in an instant. The envoys hesitated for a moment, but soon came forward more confidently than before. "There is no rule that permits threatening an envoy, my lord. If you truly do not wish for war, I urge you to withdraw your knights. We are the ones threatened here. When faced with a challenge, how can we refuse? MacLine does not fear war." But contrary to their belief, Patrick's attitude was even more resolute. The envoy's expression stiffened at this unexpected response. MacLine would not leave a single blade of grass alive. "Do you truly wish for such destruction? You must be under the illusion that we will yield under pressure, Baron." The mustached envoy from Sylvan and the fox-like man from Ferretta shifted their tone to a more overt threat. The knights standing behind them only slightly widened their eyes, but remained seemingly unfazed. It was clear they still believed they held the advantage. Maybe it's time to crumble their foundation? Thinking of how enjoyable it would be to see their reactions change, a frosty smile formed on Logan's lips. Fugitives fleeing tyranny are not bargaining chips. "Father, we have no need for negotiations with these individuals." With a decisive word and step forward, all of MacLine's knights drew their swords in an instant. Only then did the envoy's expressions vastly change. Are you serious about going to war? Are you mad? Do you want to die?" Their roaring was met with only mocking smiles from the MacLine knights. The envoys reacted sharply in the face of such ridicule. You people. Are you out of your mind? It's war if it comes to this. Do you think MacLine will survive? While the Ferretta fox hesitated with a stern expression, the mustached man from Sylvan yelled out as if in desperation. At that moment, Logan eagerly responded, "Ho ho? Mad? How brazen you are, daring to point fingers and hurl insults at this land's lord? Are you in your right mind?" No, that was you who. Logan didn't bother to listen anymore and continued forward. "Stop him." Unable to ignore the escalating threat, the envoy's guardian knights rushed to the forefront. But Logan was quicker. In the blink of an eye, a guardian knight grasped his gushing throat and collapsed. In a lightning-fast succession, Logan's sword dance left the entire envoy frozen in terror. With the collapse of the knights in merely a breath's span, the envoys, painted with horror, glared at Logan with blame and rage. One should be prepared for death when unsheathing a sword on foreign soil. Logan remained calm as he wielded his sword once more. I am an envoy." With a slash, the mustached man from Sylvan collapsed, spraying blood. The Ferretta fox immediately fell flat on the ground. "I will convey MacLine's wishes in full to our lord. Please forgive our trespass." Though slightly trembling, his voice was clear enough for all to hear. Smart move. Before the prostrated Reinhardt, who dared not raise his head, Logan laughed and turned around. In the presence of all, including the enemy's retinue, a death with excuse could serve as a pretext, but killing one who begs for mercy would only bring criticism. Moreover, his primary objective was already achieved. Luckily, those Sylvan fools are dim-witted. Satisfied, Logan bowed towards his father. In response, Patrick spoke to everyone with an imposing voice. "Let the Knights of MacLine prepare for war, to protect our sovereignty." His authoritative voice echoed through the hall, and the knights raised their swords in response. "Truly, do you believe you can win against us?" The Ferretta fox chased away, and with a confused gaze questioned. Logan, with a sneer, responded without a word. That day MacLine sent magical communications to the two counties. "We express our grave disappointment at their severe insolence and blasphemy." Though the long, flowery communication was essentially a complaint. "The envoys messed around and got themselves killed. We're annoyed. What will you do about their insolence?" Contrary to the last word of the communication, which seemed to await a response, the entire MacLine Knights battalion immediately charged toward Teslan Castle. The 70 or so cavalrymen cut through the center of MacLine Town and charged across the plains unimpeded. The fierce-looking, red-haired, middle-aged man at the forefront, running side by side with his son, inquired, "Do we need to hurry so? They might not know, but surely you understand our military might could easily crush a single county." Between the thundering steps, the voice clearly struck Logan's ears. Patrick, who had trusted Logan and held back his curiosity until the command to rush to Teslan Castle was issued, finally let out his words. So why the rush? Logan had a plan in mind from the moment he sent communications to the counties. It was clear that Sylvan, or rather the side with the slain envoy, would protest vehemently. That's why. We need to use it as a pretext. You want to declare war first? Yes. As soon as they make their move, we must swiftly capture Sylvan. The stronger the display of force, the less these trivial provocations will occur. Sylvan Castle was more than twice the size of the developed Teslan Castle, an even greater fortress than MacLine Castle. It boasted a military strength that made even the Counts of Ferretta envious. But even so, Patrick just nodded and smiled at Logan's words to quickly conquer Sylvan Castle. There is sense in your words. There's no need to prolong the war unnecessarily. Yes, there is no need to conscript additional soldiers. If we quickly capture Sylvan with our regular forces, Count Max Ferretta will not act rashly. He is much too cautious for his own good. Max Ferretta disliked taking any losses, was slow to decide, and even slower to act. Logan did not bemoan the fact that he knew this from his past life. Fortunately, his father did not ask how he came by such knowledge of Max Ferretta's disposition. Instead, he focused on what was currently necessary for himself and for MacLine. The crux of the matter is how quickly Sylvan falls. Yes. There was no one who thought this conversation absurd, not the speakers nor any who listened in. Their overflowing confidence accelerated the MacLine Knights' charge ever faster. When MacLaine's Knights Battalion reached Teslan Castle, nervousness was naturally expected among the soldiers ordered into combat readiness during their regular training. However, regular soldiers, excluding those on duty at MacLine Castle, number 1,389. The Mercenary Corps adds another 313. All are armed and awaiting orders, reported Kai, excitement overtaking any semblance of tension. You've done well. Until the next orders, they can rest. The crossbow cavalry that had turned last year's territorial wars upside down had now quintupled in strength. With the addition of his father and knights who had attained higher realms by mastering the blood-iron sword, their confidence was well justified. Sylvan and Ferretta, whichever it is, one of them will easily fall. Of course, battling both didn't seem losing, but there was no need to do so, hence it should not be done. It wasn't merely about minimizing the damage that the war would bring. If we integrate Sylvan and Ferretta, we would have 5 castles in our territory, equating to territories comparable to the border counts. It wasn't necessarily the case that a larger territory guaranteed an increased title, but the moment it happened, both factions of the first and second princes would be desperate to pull MacLine to their side. The focus of those central factions must not be drawn here to the southwestern countryside, at least until the Civil War. So Logan worked hard to create even a pretext for war, immersed in these thoughts. There is good news, came a voice. Looking up, Kai still hadn't left the room. Logan had to inquire, driven by curiosity from the look on his face. Good news? Victor has become a Force user. He's been waiting to report directly to you. Aha, finally. With an involuntary rise to his feet, Kai sighed softly and opened the door. Although he could guess why that look was on his face, there was no time to give it thought now. Right before the open door stood a somewhat flushed Victor. Sir Logan, no need for long speeches, show me. His eyes, each a different hue of red and blue, blazed with energy. Then suddenly a dim gray mist emitted from his figure, a unique force color, not at all inferior to Logan's golden hue. Yet it was also the mark of Victor, the noble slayer from the past life. Ha, 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 it's true, in just 2 years. The resplendent talent that had risen from mere slavery to a Force user in the previous life remained unaltered in this one. Victor's growth felt like a signal that all would turn out well, and Logan couldn't hide his joy. 2 days after arriving in Teslan, just as Logan started to wonder about the delayed response, the anticipated communication from Sylvan finally arrived. We express profound regret at the blatant disregard for legitimate protest and the threatening use of force by MacLine. Much like MacLine's previous communication, this lengthy message was full of courtesy and decorative language. But stripping it down to the bare essence, if you don't want war with the Sylvan-Ferretta alliance, hand over the escaped vassals, remit 10 million gold each in reparations, and give up the Teslan plains. You have 1 month. MacLine responded immediately and clearly without delaying. Doubt surrounds the legitimacy of your protest, given the insolence displayed in our territory. Putting the verbiage aside, the core message was, stop babbling and fight. Right after, a massive cavalry troop numbering nearly 1,800 charged from Teslan Castle towards the northwest.
Regressor of the Fallen Family, Chapter 63. A month for the deadline. They're quite relaxed, aren't they? A deep voice punctuated the loud clatter of horse hooves as a cavalry unit dashed across the fields, reaching Logan's ears at the vanguard. They must be talking about the time they need to ally among themselves. Even considering that, it seems a bit long, especially since Ferretta has had an unusually sparse response. By the time we take over Sylvan, Ferretta will react, or they might contact us during the battle. Yes, that's likely, but by then, everything will be too late. Patrick turned to glance back, wearing a satisfied smile on his face. The gallant knights leading the charge and the 1,000 soldiers trailing behind them, weapons in hand, brought smiles to their faces even on the verge of war. With time to spare, Patrick naturally took interest in other compelling stories. I heard your slave has become a force user. Did you foresee this when you brought him in? Yes. Planning to make him a knight? Once we return, I shall do so. Heh, who knew you had such an eye for talent? Fortune was on my side. As Logan smiled and looked back, he saw Victor, still in a soldier's garb, riding at the front of the soldiers' line just behind the knights. Though he could appoint him a knight immediately, as he had become a force user, Logan had decided to delay it a bit longer. He's still raw. It wouldn't do for him to clash with knights and get ruined too swiftly. Regardless of his consideration, Victor's expression was slightly discontented. Since his slave documents had been burned before him, it wasn't an issue of status, but perhaps he wants to fight. With the strong, Logan let out a stealthy chuckle at that thought. He had already prepared a worthy adversary to challenge the boy, Ronyan, who was diligently training in blade vision at MacLine Castle. The two prodigies would doubtlessly become excellent rivals. I'll let you fight to your heart's content later. For now, hold on, kid. True adversity had yet to show even a shadow of itself. The future's greatest weapons were still in need of careful tempering. Go! Let's go kick the backsides of the Sylvans! For now, it was time to utilize the present's main actors rather than focus on the future. 2 from the MacLine family, 73 knights, 390 soldiers, and 313 mercenaries. Nearly 1,800 cavalry troops, after obtaining ample rest, raced for half a day. Then, they could see the bewildered expressions of Sylvan troops atop the city walls. "We'll come out, Sylvan! Accept my blade." The booming voice shook the air, causing trembling among the soldiers atop the walls nearly a kilometer away. What? What is that? Flame banners? Quick, inform the Lord. As the soldiers panicked, silver-armored knights appeared as if they had been waiting for the moment. Each one donned armor embossed with a great sword engulfed in flames. At the forefront, a slightly overweight middle-aged man grimaced with disgust as he looked over the ramparts. MacLine, to actually storm in. These madmen dare to make light of me. My lord, let me lead the way. I will stop Patrick MacLine. We'll smash them. All 120 knights of Sylvan are ready. 2,512 soldiers are also ready, since they've been anticipating their hollow threats. With the recently promoted high-grade knight and his subordinates' confident shouts, the battle lines were drawn. Although MacLine's forces were unexpectedly numerous, their own troops were vastly superior. Even after receiving magical communications, they hadn't expected the enemy to really show up. But now that they did, it was almost laughable. Callian also became a high-grade knight. Patrick MacLine, you're no longer the only one in this territory. As Sylvan seethed with fury, he abruptly steeled his expression as if recalling something. What news from Ferretta? No response yet? Silent still. It seems they haven't settled internal agreements. My lord, even if Ferretta's reinforcements come, it will take half a day. We don't necessarily have to wait. No, that's not it. What if Ferretta attacks us from behind after we've crushed MacLine? Excuse me? Isn't it strange? MacLine rushing in right after a declaration of war sent out immediately after protests, and silent Ferretta. Callian, do you think that's normal? It wouldn't be. Right. They've conspired together. The damn lot! Although there was no concrete evidence, Sylvan was convinced of his suspicion. Otherwise, the swift and absurd behavior of the two families was inexplicable. These wretches dare. Barely containing his anger, he clenched his fists violently. If you're scared, Sylvan, continue to cower like a frightened fox. I will personally behead you. Stung by the insulting shouts from outside the walls, Sylvan made his decision. Contact Bifrost. Tell them that after smashing MacLine, I will offer tribute worth half of its value. Sir? Do whatever to keep Ferretta, those dogs, from taking action. Understood. And gather the knights and soldiers. Completely smash MacLine before those Ferretta dogs arrive. Sire! Grinding his teeth in rage, he muttered to himself. How dare they stab me in the back? MacLine will be devoured first, then it's your turn, Max Ferretta. Sylvan's gaze was no longer on the enemies outside the walls, but on his rival to the south. Wouldn't it be better to charge into the castle after the soldiers provide covering fire, with our knights' skills? No, not yet. If that Sylvan cheapskate runs away, we'd be in trouble. Wait. Father is right. If the knights jump over the walls and fight haphazardly, we'll damage the castle. They'll come out soon, thinking they have the upper hand. But still with no response. Sylvan cannot stand insults. Just wait a bit. How could the heir who spent his life in MacLine territory know about him? Heinkel swallowed back his words as he witnessed the enemy forces begin to move. Moments later, boom. As the castle gate opened, Sylvan forces began pouring out. Knights in armor engraved with the crossed greatsword of flame, numbering in the hundreds, cavalry numbering over 1,000, and a larger number of pikemen. Quite impressive forces, roughly 3,000, within the expected range. Of course, MacLine leaders, facing nearly 1.5 times their forces, were unfazed. Rather, those who know no shame, MacLine. Advance. Charge! Before the opposing leader's cry had fully subsided, Patrick's blade surged with red energy, unhesitatingly pointing forward. Charge! Go! I'm taking the lead! Inspired, MacLine's soldiers spurred their horses forward in unison. Such barbaric! The subordinate yelled in anger, but Callian simply snickered. Just look at them charge. They're all just soldiers. Instead of leading with their knights, MacLine's line was rushing forward, oddly broken up and spread out, with ordinary soldiers leading the charge instead of having their knightly crests. Seeing such a foolish charge, Sylvan cavalry laughed. Poor rabble. Yes, fancy equipment. MacLine must have made a good profit. Shall we crush them? Of course. He charge. Unlike the disorganized MacLine forces, Sylvan's army maintained a standardized formation with the knights leading the charge, followed by a support of over 1,000 cavalry. A tested and proven formation it was, symmetrical and effective. Once the knights and cavalry break through the center, the scattered remnants will be easily taken care of by the pikemen. Callian imagined the battle neatly playing out in his mind, but the reality of the battle unfolded in a far different manner. Let loose! Amidst the scattered MacLine rabble, a middle-aged mercenary with gray hair shouted, and MacLine soldiers promptly aligned themselves and raised crossbows. Once the distance between the two forces narrowed to 300 meters, fire! A barrage of death rained down upon Sylvan's forces like a storm. Screams and clangs of metal filled the air as the front lines of knights, previously lax, now fell beneath the onslaught of arrows, leaving the following cavalry defenseless and wrecked. As their lines fell apart and tangled up, the Sylvan ranks were rapidly devastated. Increase speed! As Callian gritted his teeth and shouted, the knights closed ranks, enhancing their force to the maximum as they charged. With the leading high-grade knight, Callian, and the others energetically charging their horses with force, it seemed that victory was still within grasp. However, I'll kill them. I'll kill them all! As Sylvan knights, powered by fury, approached the MacLine front line. Disperse! Following the command from the gray-haired mercenary, MacLine's cavalry split off left and right, avoiding the knights. Target their soldiers, not the knights! Annoyed by those words, Callian clenched his teeth, but he and the other knights of Sylvan couldn't turn back. MacLine knights were now emerging from the center of their own forces. If you have the guts, try this! A red-headed giant bellowed confidently as a red force blade over 2 meters long erupted from his sword. Force blade! Before Callian could contemplate its significance, he instinctively leaped off his horse to evade. The nearly 3-meter-long blade of crimson light swung left and right, slicing through knights who had withstood the rain of crossbow bolts, now cut down in swaths. Top tier! With more than 70 knights perfectly halved by 120, screams of despair filled the air. Annihilate the enemy! Patrick MacLine's command roared as MacLine's knights dismounted and charged towards the still superior-numbered Sylvan knights. Every swing contained formidable force that pressed the opposition. It was not just momentum but sheer power from MacLine's knights overwhelming Sylvans. How? How is this possible? In the midst of the battlefield, Callian stood with a dazed expression. Henderson, a MacLine knight well known for his strength, reveled in the exhilaration of the battle, swinging his greatsword with gusto. He felt an exhilarating surge of strength flow through him, unlike anything he'd experienced before. Though his previous encounters with intermediate-grade monsters during logging missions in the monster forest had been challenging, clashing with knights was incomparable. To think he was pushing back 2 standard knights equals to his past self with his newfound prowess. With each swing, his thrill intensified, strengthening his greatsword more and more. His vastly improved force and heightened sensation had his blade carving ever more precise arcs through the battle. Suddenly, with a scream from the enemy, Henderson sensed his force grow by more than 30% and realized he could harness it even more effectively, another 30% or more. In this moment, he understood the sensation his seniors had only described in words. Rise up! Henderson's battle cry echoed as he matured into an intermediate-grade knight in the heat of combat, seeking his next target. Henderson too? Watching his subordinates ascend to the next level mid-battle, Heinkel couldn't help but smile. The Lord's rigorous training was not in vain. The intense battle felt far from desperate. Sensing his assurance, a Sylvan knight ground his teeth and swung his sword at Heinkel. Let's see how long you keep that smile. The movements of the surrounding knights were on a different level, clearly elite intermediate-grade knights circling Heinkel, but they were the ones being pushed back. A high-grade knight. These aren't anything like Callian's moves. Grinning at their despair, Heinkel simply smiled. Mid-tier knights are precious. Perhaps these opponents would be conscripted under his command, and he took care not to damage them too, as he handled them with ease. Simultaneously, Heinkel looked around for any ally who might be in danger. Only one enemy, a high-grade knight, was of any concern. With his side's ultimate weapon rushing towards the castle, he was ready to intervene if necessary. However, Heinkel turned away with a laugh as he saw a head of red hair dart toward the enemy knight. There will be plenty of spoils once these lot are captured. Victory was theirs. A satisfied smile spread across Heinkel's face.
Regressor of the Fallen Family, Chapter 64, Clang. Clash! Guang. Damn these creatures! Callian gritted his teeth as he faced 3 knights whose defense was seemingly impervious even to him. The refined realm he had barely achieved was of a different caliber, even compared to intermediate-grade knights. Dealing with 3 intermediate-grade knights should have been within the norm for him, but now he could only watch helplessly as these knights blocked his every move, and his subordinates fell one after another. This is ridiculous! Quang! In a burst of force, Callian managed to push the 3 knights back with a powerful strike. In that moment, a golden sword cut through the wind and interjected. Leave them to me and help your comrades. With a golden force emanating from his blade, the red-haired knight cried out as the 3 knights withdrew without a word. The figure of this red-haired adversary was strikingly similar to the imposing man who, during their first clash, had managed to make Callian dodge without realizing. Flames sparked in Callian's eyes at the sight of this brat. Are you a whelp of the MacLine? Not even an hour into the battle, and his side was already showing signs of defeat. Capturing this fellow could buy his allies time to regroup. Clenching his teeth, Callian swung his force-entwined blade. However, Guang. What a lackluster high-grade knight! Put some more strength into it. Surely the aura he sensed from the brat was, at best, intermediate grade. Yet it was him who got pushed back at the collision. How dare you, a lucky brat! Overwhelmed by a sense of danger and his crumbling pride, Callian began to release a murderous intent. Good, this is going well. Seeing Callian emitting killing intent, Logan smiled. A proper enemy high-grade knight. Logan solidified the second form of his divine sword vision, Iron Splitter, pounding against the wall of high-grade force users. The wall that seemed easy to cross had been intact for months. At a time when it was maddeningly close to breaking through, facing not his own family's high-grade knights, but one from a different region, was the most suitable encounter for an epiphany. Family vacation packages. With his side slowly taking the upper hand on the battlefield, there was no reason not to be thrilled. "Come at me! Quang!" The duel began with a head-on collision devoid of any finesse or technique. Both red and gold forces collided, and the aftermath of the shock was almost equal for both. But even that seemingly even match was enough to disconcert Callian. An intermediate grade knight with the strength of a high grade? Impossible. The enhancement ratio granted by the Force grew exponentially with each high grade. This must have been due to his own complacency. "I won't hold back anymore, you brat. Keep dreaming." Clang. Crash! Bang! Boom. Their swords crossed numerous times, skimming armor and flesh alike. After another evenly matched collision, Callian's eyes finally dimmed with a heavy glare. Logan was quite pleased with the change in his opponent. "Now you're getting serious." "Damn you." Not fully understanding the situation, but accepting it nonetheless, Callian acknowledged that in terms of strength and speed, he was not being outmatched by his adversary. "How can someone so young?" "What a monster." But physical attributes aside, there was something Callian knew he couldn't emulate. He extinguished the inferno of anger and jealousy within and gripped his sword calmly. Moved by the urgency, he acknowledged that a hasty attack could spell danger for himself. Crack. Things will be different from now on. With those words spoken in a low voice, his red sword swung out, and simultaneously 2 swords aimed for both Logan's top and bottom. The vivid red blades were too realistic, even for Logan's senses to distinguish in a moment. But below! The sword targeting the lower half was undoubtedly real, while the one above seemed merely a floating red blade. Logan moved to block the lower strike when suddenly, "No, it's too obvious a trick." Realizing this, he quickly maneuvered his sword to cover both above and below. Clash! Boom! Crash! A moment too late to react, the tangible upper red blade grazed Logan's neck. Lucky you. Quite the trick up your sleeve. The realization that both swords were solid surprised even Logan, to which Callian responded with a murderous chuckle. "Enjoy that trick of yours until you draw your last breath." Whoosh. The red sword now appeared as 3 blades, each targeting a new angle. A diagonal slice from the shoulder, a horizontal cut across the legs, and a thrust. Faced with an unrelenting multi-directional assault, Logan had no choice but to retreat helplessly. But I know a similar technique that could be useful. The moment his golden blade shone, a strange energy spread, slowing the 3 incoming sword strikes in an odd way. The slightly misdirected red blades revealed an opening, which Logan exploited as he lunged forward, sword in hand. "Ugh, cut the crap!" With a forceful slash, Callian's red blade brightened, multiplying into 5. Logan had to hastily retreat from the sheer might of the new blades. As his pace fell back faster and faster, Callian seized the momentum, relentlessly swinging his sword. The torrent of 5 red blades felt like an ambush from 5 opponents, but Logan fought back with composure, bundling the swords with overwhelming force, even finding moments to counter among the pressure. Yet despite the calm retaliation, wounds piled up on his body uncontrollably. Callian, having finally taken the advantage, forgot his original intention amidst a surge of killing intent. "Die!" At that instant, Logan, eyes shining, leaped into the onslaught of those red blades, which seemed bound to rend him asunder. "Ta! Quang! Ugh!" Gasp! Another great clash ensued, but this time it was Callian who was pushed back even farther. Logan, bearing superficial cuts on his thigh and forearm, bleeding yet grinning broadly, had found it. Got it. He realized that instead of binding all 5 swords with his overwhelming force, targeting just 1 or 2 decisive blades would suffice to create an opening, despite some damage. "Each of your blows is too weak. If this is all you have, it's disappointingly flimsy." It wasn't a mere display of dominance. Logan had turned the battle into a stepping stone for his growth. Eager for Callian to exert more effort, Logan's provocation hit its mark perfectly. Crunch. "I'll slash you to pieces." "But seems like your head will hit the ground before that happens."
As Callion's eyes reddened with intensifying bloodlust, Logan charged with a smile. Clang! Bang! Guang! Crash. As injuries etched into Logan's body, more severe wounds befell Callion in return. Then suddenly, amidst Callion's ultimate technique, 3 swords, Logan's blow sliced through Callion's flank. Rip! Cough, cough! Stumbling, Callion incredulously looked at Logan. He had seen the last strike with his own eyes and yet failed to defend against it. He crossed 5 swords to block, but Logan's attack had far surpassed their power. This only meant one thing. Could it be? Thank you for the fight. Feeling 3 cores pulsing in his heart, Logan smiled broadly, the 2 cores orbiting the center core enhancing the force 8-fold, invigorating his body. His blood loss from many cuts had caused slight dizziness, but now his body was rekindling with energy. It was time to give this worthy opponent a final grand display. Let's finish with a flourish. With an intent to inspire allies and despair the enemies, Logan's core transformed into a massive golden gleam erupting from his sword. This is the end. The first form of his divine sword vision, Wave Splitter. 8 layers of golden waves surged, sweeping across a 7 to 8 meter space in front. Quang! Callion was obliterated, his armor reduced to blood-stained sand scattering in the wind. As the shocking scene drew all nearby eyes, I've captured the enemy commander, Logan shouted with a booming voice that shook the surroundings. Right at that moment, Soto Sylvan has been captured. Those who kneel and disarm shall live. All must surrender. His father's even louder outcry reverberated beyond the castle walls and across the entire battlefield. The impact of those words scattered the attention focused on Logan instantly. When did he get there? Logan smirked awkwardly, covered in blood. The battle that ensued half a day after the declaration of war concluded in just a few hours. Moreover, the result was overwhelmingly one-sided, a decisive victory for MacLine. Baron Sylvan's knight, Callion, and 42 others deceased. Soldiers 1, 2, 23 deceased. MacLine's knight, Pames, and 5 others deceased. Soldiers 0 deceased. A turnout so favorable, it would be deemed a lie upon hearing it through rumors. Sylvan ran, losing his knights swiftly to Patrick's capture. When Sylvan was taken and a sword threatened his neck, the remaining knights, poised to resist to the end, all surrendered. The MacLine knights occupying Sylvan Castle wore faces full of smiles for a reason. We have won. Decisively so. A swelling pride for progress turned into reality. There were sacrifices, but the general ease and laughter on everyone's face were well justified. On the contrary, the Sylvan family and knights kneeled in plain clothes within the great hall, the situation grim for them. Family vacation packages, but that concern was not for the conquerors to bear. Soto Sylvan, I offer you a chance. Seated in place of the Lord, Patrick's voice echoed throughout the great hall, and Soto Sylvan, who suddenly aged a decade and half a day, raised his head with a haggard complexion. Repent for your sins, and take the minimum bounty to leave this territory with your family. Already humiliated and kneeling, the defeated were now instructed to apologize. No one would accept this lightly. Such blatant declaration and unwarranted occupation will not be tolerated by the royal court either. Family vacation packages. For those watching, Soto's desperate outburst elicited nothing but hollow laughter. Just as demonstrated in the previous estate war with Teslan, the royal court held little interest in this rural backwater. Unless it was high treason or a similar major event, they wouldn't care. However, such matters couldn't be voiced publicly, so Patrick looked down at the vanquished with a sneer. You insulted and threatened MacLine, which possessed a just cause. My actions were merely to protect our sovereignty. Even the royal court will find no fault. Even if the royals overlook this, Count Bifrost of the Southwest will not allow it, especially against MacLine. Faced with this claim, Patrick tensed. If the downfall of the MacLine countdom was once caused by the Count's mismanagement, the biggest beneficiary of overturning MacLine was Bifrost, formerly a vassal of MacLine. The fertile Bifrost Plains, formerly MacLine Plains, elevated Bifrost to the position of Lord of the Southwest naturally. Owing to the mediation of the royal court and MacLaine's barren lands, Bifrost didn't enforce vassalage upon the MacLine family. But for MacLine, the name alone was distasteful. Are you declining the opportunity and choosing death? Patrick's tone naturally bore a hint of deadliness. Realizing too late that his own words had sealed his fate, Soto paled. Just whoosh! Before Soto could muster a defense, his head soared into the air amidst a spray of blood. Ah! Dad! Honey! The 3 wives and 5 daughters of Soto's kneeling family screamed in unison. In honor of the Viscount's choice for a dignified death over submission, his end came with the least pain possible. Logan, having just wiped the blood off his sword, bowed indifferently to his father. Good, that was done well. The scene had been preordained, and so Patrick's expression remained stoic. They had captured Soto to avoid unnecessary losses, and now they had killed him to sever any lingering hopes of the remaining knights. Even if there were any knights truly loyal to the tyrannical Soto, the coup was to offer a chance for change. If you had bowed from the start, it would have been a bit troublesome. But this worked out well. Regardless of Soto's actions, the outcome was sealed. The choice given was merely a facade for the narratives that would spread, aimed at preventing any hot gossip among the other nobles. Especially Bifrost. Currently it was a foe beyond the capacity of the MacLine family. For now, they had to momentarily retract for a future leap forward. Regressor of the Fallen Family, Chapter 65. You wretches will fall into ruin as well. MacLine! The wives and daughters of Soto Sylvan, cursing with voices filled with evil, were chased out of the territory with some belongings after the calamity. Noble women, who lived without a drop of water on their hands their entire lives, now faced a future without husbands and fathers, but their plights were not considered. The focus was to notify the citizens of Sylvan Castle, now part of the new territory of their new ruler, to reassure the people, and to prepare for the war that lay ahead. However, a week after the conquest of Sylvan, Logan received magical communication from an unexpected source. The Count Bifrost? The communication was unforeseen, and its content was essentially a warning, though it came too late. The Sylvan and Ferretta MacLine should cease fighting. As the Lord of the Southwest, I will mediate the war. How dare they claim to be the Lord of the Southwest? Though Patrick's face reddened with anger at this proclamation, reality was reality. MacLane's vassals placated their enraged lord as they responded to the Count's communication. Sylvan has already fallen into MacLane's hands, and the self-proclaimed Lord Soto Sylvan is dead. It was a rightful retaliation against threats, and MacLine has no intention of escalating the war further. Perhaps due to the unexpected turn of events, the Count's response came only days later. The Count's envoy will visit MacLine and Ferretta for assurance there will be no further escalation, and to convey the intentions of the Count Bifrost. The Count's intentions? Though it's a bit worrying, the lack of mention of Sylvan probably means they acknowledge our occupation. Well, it seems a bit different than expected, but it looks like it turned out as Logan wanted, barring Feretta's silence. In our current situation, what else could happen? What about Teslon Castle? With Clayton there, they could hold, should anything happen. Yes, they can hold. The war with Sylvan came to an end quickly, but that was because MacLine used their maximum strength without looking back. They still had one defeat to conceal at Teslon. Managing 3 castles was no longer as simple as before. Previously, with just MacLine and Teslon, they could focus most of the forces in Teslon and use MacLine Castle symbolically. But now, setting aside the fact that Ferretta was considered an enemy, the occupation of Sylvan meant a border with Bifrost, and they couldn't act as they used to. We must move the center of the territory from MacLine Castle to the town. Next to the Mage Tower, we've prepared a residence for the Lord's family. Summer is approaching, and the monster forest has been completely logged. We can leave but a minimum force in MacLine without any significant issues. We'll station the knights around MacLine Town and prepare so they can be dispatched to Teslon and Sylvan at any time. I recommend splitting the soldiers for garrison duties. Yes, that's a good idea. Change was inevitable, and since it was a positive change, decisions were made swiftly. The gains from the war were not only lands. We captured 75 knights? Yes. Besides the 42 who died, subtract 3 deserters, all are confined in Sylvan's prison. There are 8 intermediate knights. Ha! That's more than our own knights. We've certainly become stronger. Indeed, though the team was convincingly stronger, they didn't dwell on the fact that Soto Sylvan's complacency led to county capture. They simply smiled in harmony with their lord. All of them can be persuaded to switch sides, right? Who would be devoted to Soto Sylvan? I believe it's all possible. True loyalty to a tyrant was questionable, and if such a person existed, they weren't needed anyhow. Now, with above-average compensation, all under the same king and country, there was ample justification. Who would refuse a stronger lord while maintaining their honor, position, and wealth? Logan was confident that nobody would decline. Perhaps the most surefire method to increase knight numbers was not selecting talented individuals but conquering territories. So overwhelming a victory filled Logan with frivolous thoughts. If only Soto Sylvan acted with more caution, there would have been significant casualties. Fewer knights would have been captured, and enemy soldiers would have perished. Soldiers might become future knights. They were relatives, friends, lovers of the current citizens. Though overshadowed by the capture of over half the knights, the fact that over 1,000 soldiers surrendered alive was also an encouraging outcome. Everything exceeded expectations. It won't be this way next time. War should typically deplete resources, whether people or materials. And those who face MacLine next will not be as simple and direct as Soto Sylvan. Having subdued Teslon and now claiming Sylvan, others won't attribute it to luck. Logan cautioned himself not to get too intoxicated with victory and emphasized this to his father and the surrounding vassals. Nonetheless, smiles remained on the faces of MacLine's leadership for a while. During the high spirits, when MacLine's leadership remained in Sylvan to manage the captured knights and soldiers, the envoy of Bifrost arrived not at MacLine Castle, but at Sylvan. The Count deeply regrets the wars that MacLine has conducted every year. I too regret them. MacLine has been provoked by those around them after all. There may have been misunderstandings, and the Count knows this. He wishes to mediate before they worsen. Mediate? The war is over, and MacLine wants no more disputes. Unless Ferretta provokes us, we have no reason for hostility. The mediation was requested by Sylvan, even though things have come to this. Them starting the dispute and now calling for mediation, Soto Sylvan was truly thick-skinned. Upon Patrick's words, everyone in the Grand Hall nodded except for the envoy, whose next statement shifted the mood. The Count regrets neglecting the duty of a lord and not pursuing unity in the region, which led to these frequent clashes. As if it was some nonsensical talk, confusion filled the eyes of everyone. In light of this, on the upcoming 50th birthday of Lord Roger Bifrost, the Count, as Lord of the Southwest, wishes to meet the heirs of each family to discuss the future. Bang. Nonsense. Send heirs? Discuss the future? Does MacLine look like it would bow to Bifrost? The growl erupted with ferocity, and Sylvan's finely crafted armrest shattered under the burst of murderous intent. But the envoy, despite sweating profusely and staggering, did not avoid Patrick's gaze. If the Count wishes, those who prefer not to attend may abstain. However, gulp. Swallowing nervously, the envoy clenched his teeth and continued. Bifrost will only aid families who recognize Bifrost as Lord of the Southwest, and those who don't will have no part in discussing the future. A sophisticated way to threaten, indeed. But MacLine will not yield to threats. As Patrick's anger manifested into a formidable atmosphere pressing down on the envoy, Logan stepped forward with a smile. It might be entertaining to attend. Father, do what? I've sent the envoy off respecting your wishes. However, Patrick recalled the last moment in the great hall, his face flushing red. The prince is indeed astute. It was a sneer, viewing him as someone who couldn't grasp reality. No matter the excuse, it is impermissible for us to bow our heads to Bifrost. I'd rather die than let that happen. The unintentional surge of intensity heavy in the office. Even after I die, I won't allow it. But of course his opponent was Logan. Shall I bury you now? What? While scooping up a handful of dirt from a plant pot, Logan looked at his father, who could only stare back in astonishment. Let's hear what you were thinking then. With a sigh, Logan's response followed. We couldn't beat Bifrost no matter what we did right now. With 2 top-tier knights, 15 high-grade knights, and over 300 knights spread across 2 knight orders, the publicly known power of the Count's family, owning 5 castles and vast Bifrost plains, was overwhelming. The sheer difference in strength meant they couldn't win. Moreover, our situation may appear to be improving, but it's precarious. Far from the kingdom's center, previously uninteresting MacLine was now different. Having devoured Teslan and Sylvan successively, the current MacLine would undoubtedly have caught Bifrost's attention. With their lands bordering each other, any misstep out of pride could lead to being trampled. We need time to integrate Sylvan's knights, to decisively subjugate Ferretta and to reorganize their forces. Time for him to master the 3 forms of the divine sword according to his growth, and for the knights to advance as well. The father would know this as well yet. The situation is different from other border lords in the region. If Bifrost uses their position as lord, others will resist. The state of affairs in Southwest had been quite complicated when MacLine's ancestor committed misdeeds 4 generations ago. Despite quelling the rebellion, Bifrost failed to eliminate the old master's blood, and the royal family protected MacLine, conserving the lineage. Since then, unlike other border lords or lords, Bifrost couldn't demand subservience from southwestern nobles. It was unclear what tangled circumstances led to this reality, but Patrick's view held its own logic. Nonetheless, unbeknownst to him, the situation had slightly changed. Bifrost's northern neighbors, Percival and Luffman, have long been under Bifrost. This was confirmed during my visit to the capital. Though the confirmation came not from the capital, but rather from his past life, it was convincing enough to change his father's perspective. What? If there's backlash, it would mainly be Ferretta, which, as you know, is currently. How can that be? If we resist now, we might be crushed as an example. When did matters deteriorate to this point? I'm truly ashamed. I neglected the encroaching threat. Patrick slumped as if he lost all his strength, prompting Logan to gently assuage him. You needn't blame yourself. I only learned by chance at the capital. Our family's weakness has caused you to suffer. I'm sorry, my son. Essentially, it was acceptance of Logan's intent. Considering my skill, there will be no issue. Let's see how lands once owned by our ancestors have changed. And there's certainly something I must verify. As he watched his father's bitter expression, Logan withheld his final words and simply swallowed them down. Master, is it true we're being sold off to enemy lands? It seemed the tale from Sylvan's Grand Hall had been distorted as it spread. Not long after returning to MacLine Town, Logan encountered Hammer, whose face was full of sweat and urgency, as if he had hastily rushed over. What kind of nonsense is spreading? If the master dies, what about our promise? My freedom? I'm not dying, and I'm not being sold. Disregard such baseless rumors, would you? But most of the ridiculous rumors about the master have actually been true. Unable to refute the point, Logan was speechless. Anyway, take this with you wherever you go. What is this? I couldn't properly finish the scabbard decoration due to urgency, but it's yours, master. I assure you it's functional. After placing the sword in his care, Hammer quickly turned and left. What is this? Be sure to come back alive. Bang. Without hearing a full response, Hammer stormed out the door and disappeared. Sheesh. I'm not marching to my death. Amidst exasperation and involuntary laughter, Logan's gaze naturally settled on the sword left behind by the dwarf craftsman.